So it kind of got to a point where I was like, why? I just asked the question, like, why do I feel the need and this like pressure to join? That's what it felt like. It's like, why do I feel this pressure to find a church and join a church?
So you're in your phase of being married. You're in your late 20s at this point. I know before we started filming, you mentioned that your husband and you started having conversations that were kind of outside of the church. You had been going to church your entire life up to 28, 29 years solid, several times a week. Something happened. You moved to Philly or something happened. Kind of tell people what happened there, that things kind of changed for you.
Right. So we moved to Philly. So there was a guy that we were working with there with my business at this point. So I have my business, I'm doing that full time. And somebody in Philly invited me to come and work with him. So we went up there and ended up being there for 4 years. And in that time, once we got up there, we did visit some other churches and stuff. Because like usually whenever you go to a new area, you should start to also look for a new home. Same way you look for a new barber and a new whatever, you also look for a church. And so I remember at that point we had visited a few places that were kind of farther away from where we lived. And so we were like, no, that's like, that's too much to drive, like an hour and some change, one way, and then another hour back home on Sundays. Was like, this is not going to work. And then we found another church that was closer, and we visited there a couple times. And I just remember feeling like, I don't want to go through this cycle again.
Okay.
Because at that point I had been a part of different churches again, out of the seeking and wanting, just wanting more and wanting like something genuine to an extent. And I would get to that point and I realized that if we joined another church, it would be the same sort of cycle of, you get in, well, at least for us, I'm really good with marketing and cameras and stuff. So I'm an asset and he's a musician.
Right.
So we're like your VIP recruitment member, so to speak. And I just knew I didn't want to go through that again. And now that we're in Philly as well, I'm not really near anybody who, from my church, from my home area that would know what I was doing on a Sunday or whatever.
Okay.
So it kind of got to a point where I was like, I just asked the question, like, why do I feel the need and this like pressure to join? That's what it felt like. It's like, why do I feel this pressure to find a church and join a church? And so I decided to just take a break and then stop going to church.
Okay.
So at that point, it was like I didn't have a church home, quote unquote. I was like not going to church, and then bit by bit, my mom would call me, call to check on us or whatever. Oh, did you go to church today? I used to tell her, yeah, but I would just maybe pull up church online or something like that instead. I went to church. But I was like, no, yeah, I would tell her we went to church, but I really didn't. And then bit by bit, I started saying like, no, I didn't go to church. What you mean you didn't go to church? You didn't find somewhere to go yet? And this type of thing. And so that's where things started to change.
Okay.
Is when I said, what's the pressure? That's when I started like just asking questions, asking even more questions out of curiosity, so to speak, as to like, well, why do I feel like, what's the big deal? Because at that point we had gone of like maybe a few months of like going to different churches and all that. And we still didn't find anything. And it just was like, this is the same old. Like we're basically shopping. You're shopping for, I just was like, what's the pressure? So I decided to stop, or we decided to stop. And that's where things started to change. Because then I started like now you don't have to physically go to a building. Now you can like look up stuff online, or you can also listen to other pastors and other churches. And then that's when I came across The Secret. Somebody said something about The Secret, yeah. And so I watched that, and I was so compelled because I was like, man, this is like Bible. This is like, kind of the stuff that I've been learning about in terms of faith and belief and, all that kind of stuff. And so, that's just, again, questions. And then I saw on The Secret, there was Michael Beckwith, who's the black guy who was on there, and he has a church in LA. And so I started like tuning into their services live, just to check them out on Sundays. And it just was bit by bit. And of course they're talking about something totally like, it still was Bible. It still felt like this feels good. This feels like love, but it wasn't what I'd seen before. And there were all kinds of people there of all different backgrounds, orientations, all kinds of stuff. And I'd never seen anything like that. So again, I'm like, wow, I'm intrigued. Like, this is cool.
Okay. When you said you were seeing things that you'd never seen before, can you describe that for people? What does that mean exactly?
Like to see, just to see such a multicultural feel of like the choir and the music, and there was no, they like this particular church, like yes, they sometimes referenced the Bible, they also referenced other teachers or other books or other things. It just was not just the Bible. I'd never seen that before.
Okay.
I'd also never seen, where they're all different kinds of like sexual orientations and people that were there at this church also.
Okay.
And how that was celebrated. I was like, but they have a choir, but they're talking about, that's just as I'd never seen that before.
People just open.
Yeah.
Open and loving God and just being welcomed.
Yes. And it seemed a little bit more free and all that kind of stuff. I was like, this is pretty cool.
Okay. So did you start having discussions with your husband, like, I don't think I believe in God anymore, or I don't believe in Jesus? Or
it was like we ended up having some very interesting discussions because, again, after being in Philly, we're not really going to church. We would have talks with each other, and we would talk about just how things just didn't line up. Because you have to understand, like, he and I both were devout. Like, he's devout too. So we would, like, for a church that we belonged to in Virginia, we were the first ones there, the last ones to leave, setting up chairs, setting up the equipment, setting up everything to run this church service. And so we were just always really, really into it, and we believed in it. And so when we started to kind of have these conversations, it just was something that we unfolded together. And just through asking each other really good questions and having discussions like, well, yeah, this doesn't make sense. What about this? What about, Africa? What about all these other things that existed before the Bible? It's just like, that's where more of that conversation kind of came out from the both of us, which was pretty cool. But it did get to a point where some of my questions were a little bit too radical. Okay. Because he would be like, so are you, it's like, let me make sure I understand here. Are you saying that you think Jesus still is the Son of God or what? Because that was like a big thing. If you believe Jesus is the Son of God or not, it's like basically what side of the fence are you on?
Drawing a line.
Kind of thing, But that just was my questioning of like, well, what does that mean? Just different questions. So, we kind of had those discussions together for sure.
That's really good because that's a very intimate conversation you cannot have with a lot of people.
Yes.
So to be that open and free of judgment, like kudos to you guys, because that's a hard conversation to have first with yourself, and then being able to verbalize that to someone else. I'm having these thoughts, and they may not be received well by you or our whole entire family. Yeah. So interesting. Yeah. That's a serious level of intimacy if you think about it.
And that's what I think part of the reason why we were supposed to be together.
Oh, okay.
I think was for that.
I love that.
We got for each other a little bit.
Right, because he's your ex-husband, but for you to look back like that's why we were supposed to be together. Yeah. Because things don't happen to us. Happen for us. Yeah. He was just a chapter. Yeah. And plays a big part of who you are today.
Yeah, it does. Hugely.
Yeah. Sure. That's wonderful, actually.